Well, folks, as you can see, I have somebody that obviously is in a colder climate. His name is Doug Jewell, and he's going to talk about everything has to change. And we've been talking prior to making this video, and I've been learning about a lot of high-level people that he's had the opportunity to rub elbows with over the course of his life. So I don't know how much we're going to get in this half hour, but Doug, explain some of the things you were just telling me about as far as your history.
Okay, thank you, Ron. Well, basically, because I know we've only got 30 minutes here, I'll be as brief as I can on all of the subjects. And my personal background is quite interesting in the way that my grandfather on my mother's side was the son of a viscountess, who in turn was obviously the daughter of a lord, and they were all very much involved in the Masons and the Mason Society. One of them was a Grand Master Mason in Liverpool. And really, to cut a long story short, as I was a small boy growing up, my grandfather was the only son in his family that refused to join the Masons, although a great deal of pressure was put on him to join during his earlier life. He was a professional organ builder. He was the general manager of Rushworth and Draper, who at that time in the UK was the biggest organ builders in the country. He was, of course, a master carpenter, etc., etc. And to cut a very long story short, as a result of him refusing to join the Masons because of his own personal beliefs and how he felt they conflicted very much with his own personal beliefs, he had a successful business of his own, employing over 30 people. Within around 6 months from finally refusing to join at any cost, his business was ruined simply because nobody would pay their bills. And of course, at that time, and I believe it's still the same now, none of the churches in the UK can be taken to court for outstanding debt, etc. So they simply all refuse to pay their bills, including the Masonic lodges, etc., etc. So of course he couldn't pay his workers. He lost his business, but then he continued on the rest of his life working simply for himself as an individual. And because he was very skilled in all areas of woodwork, one of the things I remember, he would repair Yehudi Menuhin's violins, and was a good friend of his and many other people along the way. So he made a comfortable living for the rest of his life. And as a little boy, when I was growing up, I had several chats with him, or he had several chats with me, and he taught me a great deal about the Masons, the Masonic Order, the Grand Orient of Masons, the different Masonic lodges and societies there are, and the differences between them. So as a very young boy, without even knowing it, I became aware of this situation. Anyway, I progressed on my life. I became an engineer, and then subsequently started working abroad. I started in the dairy industry. I ended up working in 1991, the later part of 1991, for King Fahd at the time in Al Khazama Palace as a project engineer for his own personal dairy farm that produced 13 different dairy products that his family used every day, and the rest was given away at the gate. At that time was my first real wake-up call to the real world, because up until then I was very much like everybody else, indoctrinated into the matrix that we believe is real, but of course is a complete lie. And that was because we were 17 kilometers outside of Riyadh, and the Scud missiles were flying over us every night, or not every night, but most nights. And we could see the Patriot missiles being launched at the same time. And most of them, of course, were missing the Scuds, and many Scuds were carrying on into Riyadh and were hitting various buildings, targets, etc. And we would go into Riyadh during the day afterwards. And of course, we realized that the CNN and the BBC at the time were broadcasting that the Patriot missile shield was completely successful and that hardly anything was getting through, and that everyone was kept safe as a result of this. And of course, suddenly it made us realize, my God, this is completely the opposite to what is really happening. This is a lie. So I think from that moment, it switched something in my mind and my brain to say, you know, there's a lot of things that don't add up, that aren't correct. So I continued with my career and went from Saudi Arabia, working in Africa, in various countries all over the world. I suppose once I got the travel bug, I never really stopped to this day. And being an engineer, I was very interested in free energy. Was it real? Did it exist? Was there such a thing? And I went deeper and deeper into free energy until, to cut a long story short again, I went and met many people, including people like Paul Pantone, distant relatives of Tesla that still live in Croatia today, and many other people that would want to remain unnamed, most of which the ones that actually had true discoveries and true free energy were very much under the radar, and were actually quite, in some cases, terrified of the authorities or anybody official finding them, because they had threats and they had issues. But the reality is that free energy is real in many different sources, and in many cases not even expensive or difficult to put in place. But of course, the cartels of the world have successfully suppressed it for all of these years, going right back to Tesla. And of course, most people that have done any research into this, especially engineers, will understand that the principles of radiant energy are very clear and they're very real, and they can be tested ourselves. The principles of other sources of energy, including magnetic motors, are very real, and I've made magnetic motors myself. Paul Pantone's Geet motors that literally run on water, they're real, they work, and they're not so difficult for an even thinking engineer to work this out. So of course the solutions to our world's energy, they're here, and they've been here for a long time, but they are suppressed. So this, of course, led me on to other things, including the pharmaceutical industry, and why are so many people getting ill? Why are so many children getting autism? Why are so many people dying of cancer, etc., etc.? And this took me down another really horrible rabbit hole, where I discovered that nobody needs to die of cancer. Nobody actually needs to die of any nasty disease, and nobody certainly needs to be on pharmaceutical grade drugs. The keys to being healthy and staying healthy are all there. But of course, we realize again, this is a massive industry, and the truth is very much suppressed and ruthlessly suppressed. And I've spent time with many different doctors and people over the years that have proven this, and in some cases it's cost them their life to do the right thing, and in other cases they've agreed to be suppressed. But the reality is, again, health, food, everything. But of course we could go on and on for this, but I haven't got long. So of course we know we are being poisoned, or people that are awake know we are being poisoned. We know the chemtrails with barium and mercury, etc., are being sprayed all over for a reason. We know that fluoride is being put in the water for a reason. And I think really those reasons are to dumb humanity down, make humanity ill, or so lack of energy in general that even if it has good thoughts and goodwill, it has no energy to carry them out. And it is unfortunately on a massive scale, virtually worldwide, with one or two exceptions. Of course, the banking cartel, you know, I don't want to really go into that because that is a massive subject in itself. But one of the things that really intrigued me when I stumbled across Ron and the many videos and that he has put out on the net, and fantastic work that actually you've done, Ron, that I'm sad to say I didn't see more of, is that of course you have done so much good work seeking the truth, and not just seeking the truth but looking for a solution. And that really is what I have been thinking about time and time again over the years, and never really come out to do anything because I can't see a way through it. I can't see a way of success. But I finally think I have got something. I've got a way. I haven't mentioned it to Ron yet because that's another discussion. But of course, it's all about, one of the great things is collectively pulling all of the good people in this world. And by the way, that's the majority of them. And, I've come to realize that it doesn't matter really where these people come from, in what country, what religion. The majority of people are good-hearted people. And it also doesn't matter if they work in the army or the Secret Service or the Navy or the Air Force or whatever. The majority of all these people are good people, even going across to bankers and everything else. And I've met some very quite high-level bankers and traders from New York, etc. And the majority of them are actually good people. So the task, you would think, wouldn't be so difficult to completely wipe clean this terrible, horrible, evil, satanic control system that we have in this world and start afresh. And I really don't think it is. But of course, the thing that has stopped us doing something collectively is, of course, the media, the main media, the newspapers. The control system is in place so strongly that people like Ron, people like Ken O'Keefe, people like Paul Pantone, all of these type of people are never able to reach more than a few thousand people, or in some extreme cases, maybe 1 or 2 million. But it's not enough. And when you compare it to the mainstream media, it's nothing. And we can't seem to collectively get enough people to act together, and therefore to be able to communicate together, to be able to actually have a plan. Of course, the other thing is a plan. And this is one of the things. It's all very well being able to talk to a lot of people, but how do we plan? What plan do we go with? Because David Icke has been asked this question on a number of times. And his answer is collectively do not comply. That's been his answer. Well, that does make sense in many ways, but the reality is that if everybody doesn't simply comply, i.e. doesn't agree with authorities, don't pay their bills, don't use banks, etc., then collectively that would put us in a worse situation, and families that are poor and are struggling would be in even a worse situation. So there needs to be an actual plan. And I've spoken in depth to many people. Ken O'Keefe was somebody I spent actually 3 weeks with a few years ago. And I sort of came up with a plan then, but it didn't really work. It didn't really make any sense. Now I think that there is something, and God willing, we can do something together. And I don't know how. And I think that our job on earth is not to necessarily know how, all the time, but just to know that the Creator, our angels, whoever, and I don't want to sound all airy-fairy here, but for myself, I am spiritual. I've been very spiritual all of my life from a little boy, although unknowingly. I was told by a very well-known psychic in the UK recently that my daughter got me to go to, that I was actually very clairvoyant, which is news to me. But of course, when I think over my life and I think about the friends and family I know, there's probably some truth in that. But one thing I'm very sure is we all have our angels looking over us. We all have a Creator here. Some are more close than others, but I do believe that we are coming into this golden age. I do believe that resonance and frequency has changed in the earth so much that more and more people are aware that governments do not work anymore. That unfortunately, the very structure of a government is set up so that you have to be corrupt, or you have to be at least open to corruption to even climb up the greasy pole of politics. Without being willing to be corrupt in some way, be able to compromise your morals and your principles and your views, the system is set up in such a way that it is simply not possible for you to rise in politics anywhere in the world. So the very core of politics and government is rotten, not because the politicians start out as rotten, not because they actually want to participate in sacrifices and God knows what else they have to play a part in, but because they have to if they want to get anywhere in politics. So I guess quite logically, many of them take the view, I'm better to be in the game and corrupt than not in it at all, because at least somewhere along the way, maybe I can do something that is good. Maybe I can do some good things amongst some of the bad things. And I think politicians have been pushed into this line. They know it very well, of course, but they're unable to get out of it because they are entrapped into this system. Everybody now knows that the governments in any case are not run by honest, decent, ordinary people anymore. They're run by the banks and by finance and by money, because unfortunately we are in the grip of this financial system that has entangled us so badly that without having these finances available, we can't do anything. And of course, we know very well, and I didn't mention this, Ron, when I was talking before, but it's something that people need to know, is that Bitcoin and digital currencies that have swept across our world in recent times, Bitcoin is another product of the bankers. Don't be fooled by it, because in the end, what they want for a tighter control on humanity is, of course, to take cash out of the system. How do you take cash out of the system?
And it's easier to do it when it's all on the internet, or it's all on the web.
Absolutely. There's no coincidence that Bitcoin has survived and thrived through these years, although it has no boundaries in country or government or whatever, and it seems to have got away with it and thrived. Yes, it's been up and down. It's gone to $20,000, back down to 6 or 7. But there's no coincidence that people like Kaiser on RT and all of the financial are now talking about the dollar collapsing, financial system collapsing, and a Bitcoin type system taking over, and actually suggesting that actually maybe this is the logical next step. This is no coincidence. If these digital currencies did not on the whole belong to the bankers, the Rothschilds, the royal families of this world, they would have been destroyed a long, long time ago. So it's very obvious to me that the next step, of course, of putting us in an even tighter stranglehold is to get rid of cash, get rid of every means there is of people being able to barter outside of the financial system. And if humanity does fall for this and does go to the next step of total digital currency, then there is absolutely no escape. Poor people will have no choice. Total and absolute enslavement, which is what they already wanted. But there is a way out of this. And if people can collectively come together, they could set up their own currency, their own bartering system, their own digital currency, purely from volunteers. And people ask me, yeah, but how do you find that people that are not really infiltrators, are not insiders, that will be planted in these systems to make them fail like they always have done? Well, I do have an answer for that now, thank God, is that I've realized through the various psychics that I have visited and been present with over the years, and some of them are absolutely the real deal. There is no question about that. And they have the ability to see into a person's soul without saying a word. Now, if we as people bring together a bank of people like this for every future position or whatever decision maker that can happen in this world, there is no escape for dark-hearted people, Satanists, whatever you want to call them, to get through and get into this system, because they're seen before they even get through the door. And we've got to, as a society, as a human society, become much more aware of the power of spiritualism, of the things that we can't see and the things that we can't understand, because this is where everything becomes clear. Everything becomes very obvious, and we have a way out of this. The question is, can we collectively get enough people together to trust into a system like this? And I've said no to this for many, many years. I don't see how. Now I'm starting to believe, Ron, that there is a way, and a way by starting something very simple. And I would say this simple thing is very simple, is getting out there on the forums that we can do collectively as much as we can, and start going into the small business, set up businesses. I've seen them on there, although I've never done anything with them, but I know several people that have done startups on them and been very successful. But what would the startup be? Well, for me, very simple. We would need to grow an organization from grassroots upwards that has one goal in mind to start with, although it has an agenda, but one goal in mind, and that's stop wars. Stop all wars. That we are a species that is intelligent enough to know now that nothing is gained by making wars, by creating wars. So the one goal and the one objective is to pull everybody in to a moral, physical and financial collective that says we are going to stop wars, we're against wars, and grow to such an extent, both financially, collectively and volunteer wise, that any proposed future war that goes on in any country, whether it be the US, the UK, anywhere, can be legally and collectively challenged and stopped, because no one on this earth of right mind can turn around and look at anybody in the eye and say there is justification to start a war, kill innocent people, women and children that have no say and no part in this, to put something right. It doesn't put something right. We know it doesn't put something right. And we're far too intelligent of a species, even at the lowest level, to think that war and killing people can put anything right. And if we collectively on this earth could get together on that one thing and agree on that one thing, there will be no more wars. There will be no more fighting. There will never be a time in future where two men, women, whatever, have to kill each other to settle an argument. We don't care how you settle the argument. You can settle it any way you want, but not by killing each other, not by destroying our planet, not by bombing each other, not by that is out, and that should be a law, a universal law that should be backed up not only by ourselves as human beings, but benevolent forces and other species outside of common knowledge of people, because there are obviously very much higher intelligent species out there, some benevolent, some not. But in the end, it's for us as a human race to put this right, not to depend on some miracle, a second coming of Jesus, although that would be wonderful. At the end of the day, we are gifted with the intelligence and the spirituality to put this right ourselves, and we just need to do it. And I think now is the time. I think now is coming the time. And I can say, Ron, as for fear, people always have said to me, oh, well, you'll probably be knocked on the head. You know, you'll be got rid of if you start talking about stuff like this. You can't do this. Fear. I do not fear. I don't know what happened to me, but some years ago, my angels, whatever, said, fear is a joke. Fear is something that has been instilled into us, but it's the thing that holds us back as a human race. Fear. Fear of consequence, fear of being punished, fear of being killed, whatever. I can say for me, Ron, fear is an illusion which has held us down. It doesn't hold me down. And I can honestly say, if I'm removed from this plane, from this matrix, at any time or any place, I can't wait, because I do not fear what is next, because what is next is going back from my source, from where I come from. And it's a wonderful place, but we all have an opportunity to change this world, and we can do it. And we can start with no more wars. And I think that's just a very quick one, Ron, and just wanted to put it across as quick as well as I can. Of course, there are so many other areas that we could go into.
Always. And, you know, I really appreciate both our discussion before the camera was turned on, and, you know, what you shared in the video. And I think you've touched on a lot of things and hit a lot of chords that are going to resonate with people. And hopefully together in 2019, we can find some common ground and stop the wars and start a truth movement that lets us all know that we are all more powerful than we've been told we are.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, Ron, because we are.
Yeah. I mean, I suffer also of feeling like I can't do anything. When they stole my house, that was like a straw that broke the camel's back, because it had no mortgage on it. It was owned, but they took it anyway. And that hurt me a lot. So anyway, thank you, Doug, for taking time to share on this first video together, and it won't be the last. I think a lot of people will be interested in hearing more of what you have to share.
No, I very much appreciate it, and it's a privilege to talk to you, Ron. And I can just say that you have so much respect from me, from what I'm learning that you have already done and already stuck your neck out in this world, because I think, like me, you realize we're here to do something. We have the ability to do something, and perhaps the time has come. And I think you've been a lot braver than me, Ron, if I may say so. But I'm a slow starter, but I'm getting there.
Well, again, thank you, Doug. I really appreciate it. And for now, we're just going to say namaste, which means The divine in me recognizes the divine in you, and may we all recognize it in one another.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.